By 1944, the war in the Pacific had turned against Japan. It had lost several major battles and bases, and its carrier fleet had been decimated. A majority of its veteran and experienced air crews had been killed and couldn't be replaced. Its once superior aircraft were now obsolete and outclassed by newer American aircraft. Pre-war Japanese planners had assumed a quick war and didn't have the programs to replace losses in men and material. As the Allies advanced closer and closer to the Japanese mainland, all Japan could muster was inexperienced aircrew flying obsolete aircraft against a better trained, technologically and numerically superior adversary. As a result, kamikaze or self-sacrifice tactics were adopted by the Japanese military, and special attack units were created to carry out these missions. The Japanese military determined the reward of sinking or damaging an Allied ship, especially if it was a capital ship, was a justifiable reason for a kamikaze attack. Kamikaze attacks were deemed more accurate than conventional attacks and often caused more damage. Kamikaze aircraft were essentially pilot-guided explosive missiles, either purpose-built or converted from existing aircraft. One such purpose-built aircraft was the MXY-7 Ohka or Cherry Blossom. The Ohka was a rocket-powered, human-guided anti-ship missile powered by 3 Type 4 Mark I Model 20 rockets, which fired for 8 to 10 seconds. They could be fired one at a time or all at once, giving the Ohka an attack speed of 400 miles per hour in level flight and up to 620 miles per hour in a dive. This speed made the Ohka, armed with a 2,600-pound aminal bomb, difficult to stop. However, the Ohka had a short range, and given that the Ohka was a man-flying bomb and not an actual airplane, it had to be carried into attack range by a much larger bomber, which was usually a GM-4 Betty bomber. Once in range, the Ohka would be released by the bomber and glide towards its target before the pilot would fire the Ohka's solid-fueled rockets and fly towards the target ship at a high rate of speed. The Ohka would see limited combat use during the Battle of Okinawa, where they were used to attack Allied ships. On the first day of the battle, April 1, 1945, 6 GM-4 Bettys carrying Ohkas would attack the U.S. fleet off Okinawa. At least one was thought to have made a successful attack on the battleship USS West Virginia, in which an Ohka struck one of West Virginia's 16-inch turrets. However, post-war analysis determined no Ohka struck the West Virginia, and the attack only resulted in a near miss. All 6 GM-4s were destroyed. On April 12th, a flight of 9 GM-4s carrying Ohkas attacked the U.S. fleet surrounding Okinawa. The Allen M. Sumner-class destroyer Maynard L. Abley, named after the submarine commander of the ill-fated USS Grunion, and LSMR-189 and LSMR-190 were on radar picket duty when they came under attack by a kamikaze force consisting of both regular aircraft and Ohkas. At 13:45, 3 D-3A Vals attacked, but 2 were driven off by gunfire, with a third being set on fire. It attempted to crash into LSM-189 but failed. 15 minutes later, at 1400, the Abley was attacked and surrounded by between 15 and 25 aircraft. Except for one light bomber, the enemy aircraft stayed outside of the destroyer's gun range for more than half an hour. At 1440, 3 A6M-0s made an attack on the Abley. The destroyer and her crew fought gallantly, with her guns driving off one Zero and shooting down another almost 4,000 yards out. A third aircraft, spewing smoke and fire from numerous hits from the destroyer, slammed into the Abley's starboard side and penetrated the aft engine room, where it exploded, severely crippling the ship. The blast caused the ship's bridge to lose control. All guns and directors lost power, the ship's keel was broken midships, and the aft engineering spaces were completely destroyed. However, it's not confirmed that it was one of the Zeros that crashed into the Abley. The captain on LSM-189 wasn't certain what the aircraft was. He saw what appeared to be 2 planes orbiting in a northerly direction from the destroyer before one of the planes suddenly accelerated at a terrific rate of speed, far too fast for any of the ship's guns to be able to fire at. The aircraft dove at a 30-degree angle from about 4 miles out. This description fits the attack method of an Ohka. Regardless, 1 minute later, at 1446, the destroyer would be struck a second time. This hit was confirmed to have come from an Ohka, which hit the destroyer on the starboard waterline abreast from the forward fire room. This second attack would be fatal for the ship. The explosion from the Ohka's 2,600-pound warhead caused the ship to buckle, and the destroyer almost immediately split in two, with the bow and stern sinking rapidly, taking 84 lives with her. The survivors would be bombed and strafed by enemy aircraft before being rescued. The Abele would be the first ship hit and the only one sunk by an Ohka during the Okinawa campaign. Also involved in this attack were destroyers USS Jeffers and USS Stanley. Jeffers managed to shoot down an Ohka with anti-aircraft fire only 50 yards from the ship. However, this would be too close to escape damage, and the resulting explosion caused extensive damage to Jeffers, and she would withdraw from the battle for repairs after assisting in rescuing survivors of the Abele. Stanley had an Ohka slam into the starboard side of her bow a mere 5 feet above the waterline. Fortunately for Stanley, the Ohka overpenetrated and punched clean through the ship and detonated in the water on the ship's port side. The remains of the pilot and some wreckage was recovered inside the ship. Soon after this failed attack, a second Ohka made an attack run on the Stanley. The destroyer's anti-aircraft guns opened up on the attacking aircraft, either wounding or killing the pilot as it just barely missed the ship, flying low enough to snatch Stanley's ensign from its gaff before skipping across the water and disintegrating. Stanley, amazingly, only suffered 3 wounded sailors during the day's attacks. Only one Betty from the 9 that began the attack returned. The rest of the month would be pretty uneventful as far as Ohka attacks were concerned. On April 14th, 7 Bettys would attack the U.S. fleet and all would be shot down without any Ohkas being launched. On April 16th, another attack was attempted by a flight of 6 Bettys carrying Ohkas. 4 Bettys were shot down and no Ohkas hit their mark. 12 days later, on April 28th, 4 Bettys would attempt a night attack on the U.S. fleet with the loss of 3 Bettys and no successful hits by any Ohkas. Ohkas wouldn't cause any further damage to U.S. ships until May. On May 4th, 7 Bettys attacked the U.S. fleet off Okinawa. This attack would be slightly successful. The destroyer Shea spotted a lone Betty 6 miles away at 0854. 5 minutes later, an Ohka was spotted by a lookout aboard Shea, but it was closing at a speed of 520 miles per hour. Far too fast for any sort of reaction or countermeasures, and the Ohka slammed into Shea's bridge on her starboard side. The Ohka crashed through the sonar room, traversing the chart house, passageway, and batch before exiting the port side of the ship and exploding on the surface of the water. Fire broke out on the mess deck, the combat information center, the chart house, the division commander's stateroom, number 2 upper handling room, and compartment A304L. All ship communications were lost, 5-inch gun mounts 1 and 2 were inoperative, and the forward port 20mm guns were damaged. The main director was jammed and the gyro and computer rendered unserviceable. 1 officer and 34 men were killed with 91 others wounded. Shea took on a 5-degree list to port and limped from the battlefield to seek repairs and medical assistance. Too heavily damaged to be repaired quickly, the war was over for Shea, but the ship would be fully repaired and returned to service until being decommissioned in 1958 and sold for scrap in 1974. The minesweeper Gady was also targeted by an Ohka in this attack. Despite the Ohka having an estimated speed of 400 knots in its attack on the minesweeper, the ship's gunners found their mark, blowing off the cowling of the piloted missile before it quickly disintegrated and tumbled through the air, crashing 15 yards off the ship's port bow. Shrapnel from this Ohka would knock out the port 40mm gun and wound 3 men. Only 1 GM-4 returned from this attack. On May 11th, a flight of 4 GM-4s made another attack on the U.S. fleet. The destroyer Hugh W. Hadley would be targeted by one of the Ohkas from the flight of GM-4s, but the destroyer would inflict massive damage to the enemy before being damaged beyond repair. The GM-4s were part of a much larger air attack that numbered approximately 150 airplanes. The destroyers Evans and Hadley would withstand this attack for almost 2 hours, shooting down many aircraft, but Hadley would take several serious hits, causing the ship to go dead in the water at 0900. Despite being immobile, Hadley would continue to fight on alone. At 0920, she came under attack by 10 aircraft attacking in multiple directions. The ship should have been an easy target, but she put up a very effective defense, with her gunners shooting down all 10 attacking aircraft. However, the enemy managed to inflict more damage to the ship. A 500-pound bomb struck aft, and one of the Ohkas managed to score a hit on Hadley as well as 2 other kamikaze aircraft. The ship was flooding and badly holed. 28 crew members were killed and 67 more were wounded, but she never sank. Her damage control parties kept the ship afloat. The destroyer would make it back to the U.S. before it was determined she was too damaged for repair. Haley shot down at least 23 aircraft during the day's fight and was likely the last ship to be damaged by an Ohka. No more successful Ohka missions were conducted. On 25 May, 11 GM-4s took off for an attack on the U.S. fleet, but bad weather forced most to turn back with no recorded hits. And on June 22nd, 6 GM-4s attacked the fleet, but again, no hits were recorded and only 2 GM-4s made it back. Post-war analysis determined the Ohka's impact during the war to be negligible. No U.S. capital ships were hit because of effective defensive tactics. Just like the Kite and Man torpedo, the delivery system was a major weakness of the Ohka flying bomb. The slower Betty bomber was easy prey for Allied carrier-borne fighter aircraft, and the Allies quickly adapted to Ohka attacks by extending the defensive perimeter of their ships. In total, 300 Ohka were available for the Okinawa campaign, with only 74 actually taking part in operations. Of those 74, 56 were lost with their parent aircraft or in making attacks on the U.S. fleet. The final tally would be 1 U.S. ship sunk, 5 U.S. ships damaged, at least 147 U.S. sailors killed with approximately 200 wounded. Japan lost at least 38 GM-4s, each with a crew of 7, and 56 Ohkas, each with a crew of 1, resulting in at least 322 Japanese airmen killed. The Allies referred to Ohkas as Baka Bombs or idiot bombs.